All right. Well, thank you for joining me. I'm Terri Kimble with the Chandler Chamber of Commerce, and I have with me here this morning Representative Jennifer Pawlik from Legislative District 17, and also Representative Jeff Weninger with Legislative District 17. Thank you so much for joining us. There's so much going on right now and information coming out. Can you tell us a little bit and give us an update of what's happening down at the Capitol? And Jennifer, we'll start with you.
Yes, right now we're actually on a recess, but unbelievably, a week ago, it feels like ages ago, we did start working on our budget. So that was last Thursday, and one piece, even though I realize this is for the chamber, one piece that we did pass had to deal with the schools closing. So that was actually a unanimous bill, and it's wonderful because we had a piece in there for if schools were closed through March 27th, and then there was another piece if they were closed longer. So we're expecting the governor to sign that bill today. And obviously we know that schools are now going to be closed at least through April 10th. So I know a couple of pieces that people have been really concerned with is, are teachers going to be paid? And the answer is yes. Are support staff going to be paid? And the answer is yes. If they can't work remotely with their normal job, they may be assigned to other tasks so that they can continue to get paid. And then a lot of people have been very worried about state testing. And at this point, state testing will be canceled. We will do a waiver with the U.S. Department of Education so that that's not a concern. We came back to work on Monday, and there were 21 of us, including myself, who voted remotely. I voted from my office and other people voted from home, but we finished what we were calling the skinny budget packet. And we have recessed through the 13th of April. And I don't know, Representative Weninger, if you want to provide more points on that.
No, that was a good update. What else did we do? I think with getting the baseline budget through, we also put on the 5%, the last of the 5% raise for teachers going forward. Also had another chunk of the district additional assistance that got put back in. And really, it was just to kind of give us a surety, not knowing the unknown, trying to get out there as quickly as possible just to be safe to our chamber and stuff, but also to have the assurity of government, not knowing what's going to happen a month from now and getting that solidified. Yeah, I can tell you my daughter's like happy about this. She just, she thinks it's extra spring break with this going on, but I think they're definitely starting back up kind of Monday with the remote stuff. So I think she'll get reality hitting her pretty soon. But there was also some unemployment things that we did. And one thing we did is I think we gave $105 million total state money to coronavirus and dealing with that. And then the one thing that I think is really good is we gave the governor quite a bit of flexibility in that money and going forward and how to deal with this. So he's been doing a good job putting forth a lot of executive actions and some regulatory rollback on some things that have been interesting that maybe we can talk about, or whether it's telemedicine or selling alcohol outside of restaurants.
Well, I will tell you from a chamber standpoint, I know that you've been busy. We've been watching what's going on at the legislature, and obviously I would have liked to have been down there a little bit more, but unfortunately sometimes we have to watch it by committee meetings and still weighing in and letting you know, because we do our homework on the front end and hearing from our businesses. But we have had daily phone calls with the governor's office and chambers across the state, and it's been very, very informative to help get that information out to our businesses. So you're on this temporary recess, and once you go back, what are going to be the key things that we need to look out for?
Boy, I think that when we go back, part of what we're going to be looking at is the JLBC report to see what kind of revenues we have available. Because I know that there were, in the education community, again, I'm going back to that because that's where my passion lies. But I know that there was a lot of disappointment in the skinny budget that essentially the doubling and paying off of DAA was not included, and that's district additional assistance. So I think that that's something that we'll be looking at if there's funding to be able to do that. And then I know that there were other bills that a lot of people have worked really hard on. There was a bill that Mr. Blackman out of District 6 has been working on, having to do with the earned release credits. And that's for people who are in prison who have non-violent drug offenses. They would be able to be released early if they had completed major life programming. So there were a lot of people on both sides of the aisle who were really supportive of that, but it hasn't passed through. So those are two examples of things that I think we'll be looking at when we return.
Jeff, anything that you'll be working on when you return?
Yeah, I think definitely the budget. I mean, we did the baseline budget with some additions. We have to see where our revenues are. I mean, you know, restaurants, people are going to grocery stores, which, you know, I don't think we should be taxing food like that anyway, but the revenues that are coming in compared to people eating out at restaurants every night is far less for the state and the city. And then numerous other things. I mean, tourism has come to a halt. And so it's really what the budget looks like going forward is gonna just depend on how these revenues and the estimates are when we get back. Jennifer's right, there's a lot of good bills. That one she mentioned about early releases is definitely one. Last year, there was a different version of it that I think is going to let about 1,000 people out of jail early. And I negotiated a compromise to that. And there were some people who didn't want to vote for it, said, oh, we'll just wait till next year. And think about that. Just if you have 60 legislators and 90 legislators saying, no, you 1,000 people can wait till next year. We don't think this is enough. And so that's why those bills are important. That's why people say, oh, you just don't want your bills to die. That's an important bill. That could mean thousands of people getting out of prison early. I have other bills. I have a bill I'm running for the Attorney General's office that deals with pregnancy discrimination and mimics federal law to make sure that during pregnancy or anything dealing with pregnancy that you can't be discriminated against in the workplace. I mean, so yeah, our bills are important to us, and people kind of liberally make light of it. Oh, you just want to get your bills done. But, you know, obviously we got to see what the atmosphere is like. But I'm going to be pushing that we go back for the full 2 weeks of committee left and then try to get the rest of the bills out. I had just gotten an agreement between all the parties on the wine bill that I'm running, which kind of mimics the beer bill from 2015, my first year there, to help grow this incredible industry in Arizona, which touches agricultural and then retail and all different kinds of things. And so I'm excited to get back. I'm, you know, hoping and praying that this whole situation relieves itself in a few weeks.
Do you feel that this crisis has brought the parties more together so that you can get some things accomplished?
In some aspects, I'll answer first on that one. In some aspects, yes. In some aspects, no. I think there's a lot of us who work together down there anyway, Jennifer included, and I, and a lot of us anyway. I think it showed some people on both sides, good and bad sides of the other. I know one person who I won't name who's on the other side who was astounded by some of the comments coming at them about their small business and how just easily people were saying, just shut your business down for months and kinds of things. And But there's been a lot of coming together, but you could see over the federal stimulus, they did come together, but it got pretty crazy before they did. So I think you're seeing shades of both.
And I would agree with all of those comments that there are surely things that we work together on and we do a good job with that. And then there are other things where I don't know that we should work together better than we do.
I will tell you, I know that we are so blessed in Chandler because we have both sides of the aisle represented. And anytime I come to any of you, you really listen, you really take a look at the issue, and I truly appreciate that. So one of the other things, we conducted a business impact survey, and granted, this was done about a week ago, and we know that sometimes things are changing by the hour here with this situation. But out of that, we had 551 businesses respond to that survey. The number one and number two things that businesses were really asking about is obviously the financial resources. And number two is assistance with their landlords. And that's what we're also hearing. And I know that the governor did some, it's not forgiveness, but he's done some things with the housing and the evictions so that to help put a stop on that. But moving forward, taking a look at some of those things for our businesses in the immediate future would help. And then some of the other suggestions that came in how do you put a temporary freeze, not forgiveness, but a freeze on maybe even TPT, taxes and that. What does that look like? Are you getting briefings on some of those types of things or forecasting?
Do you want to take that one, Jeff?
I can start. TPT, I hadn't heard about. That's a tougher one because
it is.
If you're essentially, that's not money that you have that you're owe the government that you're just kind of deferring. That's money you've collected for the government. That's not actually your revenue. So that's a tougher one. And if the state is doing lots of things for people and increased, this unemployment, different things, it's tough to take the revenue that's supposed to be coming in, collected through sales tax for them. As far as the landlords, I have seen a little movement. To me, that's probably going to be maybe a federal thing where they just have to pass something nationally, or if we get back in, maybe that's something. But the problem is you have to go all the way upstream, because if you say you don't have to pay your landlord, but that landlord has a bank that they have a note with too, and so it keeps going. If I can touch very quickly on the stimulus plan, obviously there's these SBA loans they've talked about, but then there's this, what I call the Marco Rubio part of the stimulus plan that's supposed to be passed today, and the president should sign immediately. So this is the small business function of it. And it is really one bright spot in this entire thing. The way it basically works is if you have employees, or even this works for independent contractors can do this. If you're an Uber driver, different people, you can look at this as well. But say you have a payroll as a business, you have 20 or 30 employees, and let's say your payroll is $20,000 a month. You would choose that in one of two ways. You would find your average, and it's the lower of the two. Either you go back to 2019, come up with an average per month of your payroll. Okay, that's 20,000. Or you would use January and February of this month to come up with a 1 month average, and say that's 22,000. So you would go with last year because it's lower. So $20,000, you multiply that by 250%. So you'd be at $50,000. The government, you would go into a bank, you wouldn't go through government. There'd be a little bit of paperwork up front, but not much. The real heavy paperwork and scrutiny is on the back end. So they would give you $50,000. You would need to use that for payroll costs, which can include, your normal payment, hourly salary, health insurance. But you could also use it, real quick, on the average, you mainly just use payroll costs to come up with that average. But then when you spend it, they're giving you 250% of that for 8 weeks. So you could use it on those payroll costs. You could also use it on any utilities, including internet, electricity, different things. And you could use it on your lease or your rental or your mortgage on a building if you actually own the building. So then it's helping you in multiple ways with your payroll, getting through that cash crunch, and your rent and stuff for those eight weeks. At the end of the 8 weeks, the SBA or maybe I think it might actually be the bank again, will scrutinize and go through it. As long as you've kept pretty much the same amount of employees and having the ballpark of the same payroll, anything that was spent on those admissible expenses would be forgiven. It's a loan, but it'd be a forgivable loan. So let's say of the 50,000, you spent $40,000 on those things, and then you had 10,000 left over. The 40,000 would be forgiven. You wouldn't owe anything. And then the $10,000 would be a 10-year loan at 4% interest. So this is truly a really good bridge to get people over this. For once, you know, the federal government, it's not just all about, you know, these multi-billion-dollar corporations. It's getting down to Main Street, and I think it would be very good for all of our Chandler businesses, and they can all contact me if they want more information or have specific questions.
That's great. I know last week we did a webinar with SBA on the new SBA, the disaster relief loan. And they have some pretty amazing things that are happening with that. And I know that we're seeing turnaround on that alone is anywhere from about, in a perfect scenario, about 3 weeks turnaround to be able to receive those monies. So hopefully we'll start to see some of ours. And I do know some Chandler businesses that have applied for that.
And that's good. But I would, at least in my humble opinion, would tell people to go this other route first, because you'll still be able to apply for that, I think, at a later date. And that isn't forgivable. It's just a straight loan. And some people are going to need that for certain things. But this other portion that's being passed today, again, is a forgivable loan. And so you wouldn't have to pay it back.
That's amazing. So we just have to keep putting our heads together. Jennifer, I want to talk to you a little bit. You mentioned briefly about the testing and some of the things that are happening with schools. We need to make sure that we're keeping that quality education and those standards. What are some of the things that, from an educator, from your background, that you think that we should be doing as a state to move forward during this time?
I think we really have to pay attention to the access issues, because I think we have it pretty good here in Chandler, because I think most families have internet, most families have access to a computer. So I feel like most of us here in Chandler will be pretty much okay. But there are low-income areas throughout the state where students don't have access to computers, they don't have internet in the home. And it's possible that their parents cannot even afford the $10 packages that Cox and other internet providers are offering right now. I also worry about on the Indian reservations out in real rural Arizona. A lot of the homes out there don't have running water. They don't have electricity at all. So we have to be really careful when we are providing education for our students that it isn't becoming an issue of the haves and the have-nots, because what that will do is it'll really increase the gap between our students even more than we already have. One of the suggestions I made on the floor last week was that perhaps our public radio and public TV could offer lessons so that students can at least have something. And I do know that PBS is offering educational programming with lessons. I haven't tuned in yet because I've been too busy doing other things to see what they're offering, but I know that PBS is doing that. And the Hopi Nation started on radio programming right away, so I think that's fantastic. There are some communities that are doing workbooks. I have a friend who's a counselor in the city of Maricopa, and that's the way they are conducting their programming is through workbooks because they have a lot of students who can't access the internet. So I think we're going to have to be really creative. We have to be patient with one another because most educators aren't trained on how to conduct the lessons online. So they're trying to quickly learn and get up to speed this week so that they can start offering the lessons next week. I think it's easy for people to judge others when they're tuning in. And I urge people just to be kind right now because we're all learning. We're all trying to do the best that we can do. I have also had a question from a parent of a special education student, and she was very concerned that her child would not be receiving the hours that are laid out in the individualized education plan or the IEP. And what I can assure you in talking to principals here in our city is they're working really hard to figure out how to meet the needs of the students. Earlier in this conversation, Representative Weninger pointed out that the governor has passed an executive order regarding telemedicine. So if students have PT, physical therapy, OT, which is occupational therapy, or speech and language pathology, all three of those were included in the governor's executive order. So the students who have access to technology will certainly be able to receive those services now that that order's gone into effect.
And on that, Terry, there's a bill that got out of the House basically saying that. It's in the Senate right now. Again, it's another reason that a lot of us insisted on not going into sine die, but just pausing the session. And I had constituents specifically reach out to me on the telemedicine issue, and their son, who is 2 and gets physical therapy, and basically their therapist said, well, I can't do it. It's not legal to do it through telemedicine. And I had contacted the governor's office, and I think they had other calls too, but the next day he did the executive order. And I just don't think, like Jennifer said, it is time to be kind. And you know how you have those people who tell you anecdotally, they're driving down the street and I think you've seen this on Facebook, and somebody's just losing it next to you, but you don't really know what's going on in their personal life. You don't know the kind of pain they might be in and stuff. And so it's just be kind. A lot of people have a lot of things going on, work, inconvenience without having to do certain things, but people's whole lives have been up into, whether or not they have a small business, that they're just think that everything they built for years and years is going down the drain, not by their own fault, but just to some random pandemic, or, somebody depends on that telemedicine and that physical therapy, and it keeps their child calm, and they don't have that right now. Now they do, but it's just, we have to be aware that everybody's got things going on, and be kind, as Jennifer said.
Well, I'm so pleased that we have both of you representing us down at the state legislature, because especially Jennifer, with your background in education, which is so critical to Chandler, and Jeff, you as a small business owner, you're walking in the same shoes that each and every one of us are. And that's really important, because that becomes very real, especially when you're down there making those votes on what your constituents want. So I appreciate that. So before we wrap this up, I'm going to ask if either of you have any final words that you'd like to share with everybody that's listening.
One thing that I wanted to share is that I have reached out to the Arizona Commerce Authority, and I've reached out to some of our large businesses here in Chandler to see what is going on with our companies in the fight against COVID-19. And let me see if I can quickly access notes on what Intel is doing, because it's really exciting. They are donating $1 million through the Arizona Community Foundation, and that will support the efforts of the nonprofits here in our state. They're also donating 1 million pieces of PPE. And in addition to that, coming from our Arizona Intel, they are sending 50,000 masks from their Arizona plant to Arizona. I'm sorry, from their Oregon plant to Arizona. And then they have a foundation called the Intel Foundation that employees can donate to. And that will benefit different organizations, including United Way and for our city, Chandler. They are matching contributions up to $2 million in the fight against COVID-19. So I think that's wonderful. And then I learned yesterday afternoon, actually from the Gilbert Chamber, that the Maricopa County community colleges are donating their PPE supplies that they've used in their nursing courses because they've gone completely online. So that's a couple of ways that Arizona is helping in the fight, or our Chandler area companies are helping in the fight.
Well, and we're hearing those success stories all over, and where companies are donating food to food banks or donating their employees instead of laying them off. They're lending them to those food banks to be able to help get some of those resources out there. So Jeff, anything else that you would like to add?
I would just say, Chandler, keep doing what you're doing. Gilbert, our whole community has really rallied. Small business community has rallied, the large business community rallied, and the people. I mean, I see going into restaurants and different things, you know, doing the curbside takeaway and trying to support our restaurants if we want them here and different things later on. Be good. If anybody needs information pertaining to that small business piece, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, jweninger@azlex.gov. I have an infographic I created that kind of takes you through the steps of what you need to do once this thing hits in the next few days.
Well, and Jeff, maybe we'll get you on at a later time and where you can go into depth in that and really kind of talk about that.
Yeah.
I think that's, I don't care how many times, and people need to hear it over and over again, that there are resources out there.
Absolutely.
So thank you both for joining me, and I can't wait to be able to push this out to our members in our community and keep up the great work down there at the Capitol. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.